She was hunting traffickers he was hiding from his past. When two warriors find redemption, she had always been drawn to helping people, even when it had cost her sleep, comfort, and sometimes even her peace of mind. From the time she was a child, she remembered noticing the small injustices around her. The lonely child on the playground, the neighbor who struggled to get food, the stories of people being treated unfairly. She could not ignore them. That natural instinct to help others led her to study social work, to dedicate herself to understanding the problems of people who lived on the margins of society. She wanted to be the kind of person who could make a difference, not just talk about it. Her name was Amina, and by her early 30s, she had become one of the most determined investigators fighting against human trafficking in her country. She had a reputation for being relentless, for never giving up even when the odds seemed impossible. Amina had learned to trust her instincts, and more importantly, she had learned to rely on her courage. There was a sharpness in her mind, a clarity that allowed her to see patterns others might miss, and a warmth in her heart that kept her grounded. But behind that strength was a personal tragedy that had driven her even harder into her work. She had lost someone very close to her, someone she loved dearly, to the cruel hands of traffickers. That loss had carved a space in her life that nothing else could fill. And every case she took on was not just about justice, it was personal. Amina's days were long and exhausting. She often woke before dawn, reviewing case files and tracking reports, planning her next moves. The work was dangerous, and she knew that at any moment, the people she pursued could turn violent. Yet she had never backed down. Even when colleagues warned her to slow down, to take precautions, she insisted that courage meant moving forward even when fear was present. She had learned the hard way that hesitation could cost lives. Meanwhile, in a small, quiet town far from the city's busy streets, a man named Rafi lived a very different life. He kept to himself mostly, speaking only when necessary, and avoiding attention. He had lived under an assumed name for years, carrying the secret that weighed heavily on his shoulders. His past was complicated, a story of mistakes, regrets, and moments he wished he could erase. Rafi had once been involved in dangerous circles, making choices he was not proud of. But time had changed him, and he sought a quiet redemption in the small acts he performed daily, helping neighbors, doing odd jobs for those in need, and staying out of trouble. Rafi's town was calm, with tree-lined streets and simple houses. The morning smelled of fresh bread and wet soil after early rains. It was a world away from the chaos he had once known. Yet, even in this peaceful setting, he could never fully escape his past. He lived cautiously, always aware that if anyone discovered who he truly was, the life he had built could vanish in an instant. And so he moved through the town with quiet humility, a man who carried the shadows of yesterday, but tried to be a better person today. Their worlds were destined to collide, though neither of them knew it yet. Amina had been following a network of traffickers that had moved operations into towns like Rafi's, small places where no one would notice strange activity. She had spent weeks tracking their movements, talking to informants, and piecing together a puzzle that had taken lives and left scars in its wake. Each lead brought her closer to understanding the structure of this criminal network, and each step brought her closer to danger. One morning, as the sun rose over the quiet town, Amina arrived in a nondescript vehicle, her eyes scanning the streets with sharp focus. She wore simple clothes and carried only what she needed, a deliberate attempt not to draw attention. Her mind raced with questions. Who were the people behind this network? How had they managed to hide for so long? And most importantly, how could she reach the victims before it was too late? Rafi, on the other hand, was tending a small garden behind his house when he noticed someone new in town. A woman, moving with purpose, scanning the surroundings as if she were searching for something, or someone. There was an intensity in her gaze that caught his attention immediately. It was the kind of focus that came from a person who had a mission, someone who had lived through pain and learned to transform it into action. Rafi instinctively stayed back, observing from a distance. He had learned long ago not to trust strangers too quickly, especially those who stirred curiosity with an aura of determination. That same afternoon, fate nudged them closer together. A minor confrontation occurred near the town market. A local boy was being harassed by a group of troublemakers. Rafi, unable to ignore it, stepped in to defend the child. The incident was over quickly, but Amina had witnessed it from across the street. She noticed the calm yet firm way he had handled the situation. There was something familiar in his actions, a mixture of courage and restraint, that piqued her interest. She knew she had to learn more about this man, though she did not yet understand why. Their first conversation was cautious. Amina approached Rafi with professional questions, trying to gauge whether he had any connection to the network she was investigating. Rafi answered carefully, revealing just enough to seem ordinary, yet withholding the truths that could endanger him. Despite this guarded interaction, a subtle recognition passed between them, a silent acknowledgement that both carried burdens that few others could understand. It was not trust yet. It was curiosity, the first step toward a connection neither of them expected but both would come to rely on. As the days went by, Amina continued her investigation while Rafi observed discreetly, noticing patterns and inconsistencies that even she had not yet seen. Each moment they spent near each other built an invisible bridge between their lives. He admired her courage and dedication, while she sensed in him a knowledge and experience that could become invaluable if he could be persuaded to help. Yet both were wary, understanding that trust had to be earned and that any mistake could have consequences far beyond their personal lives. At night, Amina reviewed her notes alone in her temporary lodging. She felt the weight of her mission pressing on her, the urgency of rescuing innocent people from harm. Memories of her lost loved one often resurfaced, a sharp reminder of why she could not fail. Rafi, meanwhile, sat by the window of his modest home, reflecting on the life he had left behind and the possibility of making a difference, even after years of hiding. Neither could have predicted how deeply their lives would intertwine, but destiny had begun its careful weaving, setting the stage for a partnership born out of courage, redemption, and the shared desire to protect the innocent. Though the town remained quiet, the tension beneath its surface was growing. The traffickers were closer than anyone realized, and their actions would soon force Amina and Rafi into situations that would test their limits. For now, however, the first threads of their connection were forming. Two warriors moving along different paths, unaware that the same mission would soon demand they walk it together. By the end of those first few days, both Amina and Rafi understood something essential. Courage could appear in unexpected places, and redemption could be found in the willingness to face danger, not to hide from it. Neither fully realized it yet, but their lives were no longer separate. They were moving toward the moment when trust, bravery, and the desire to fight injustice would bind them together, and when the past and present would collide in ways that neither could ignore. The town had always been quiet, almost sleepy in its rhythm, but the presence of the new woman stirred something that neither Rafi nor the locals could ignore. Amina moved with purpose, her eyes constantly scanning the streets, shops, and alleys. She carried herself in a way that demanded attention, even when she tried not to stand out. To most people, she was just a stranger passing through, yet to Rafi, she was an enigma, someone whose energy was impossible to overlook. That morning, Amina had received a tip from an informant in a neighboring town. A small warehouse on the outskirts of the community was rumored to be used by traffickers for temporary storage, and she knew that time was of the essence. Every hour counted when lives were at stake.
She had planned carefully, mapping out the streets and possible escape routes, but something about this town made her uneasy.
It wasn't just the strangers or the narrow roads. It was the feeling that someone, somewhere, was always watching. Rafi had noticed her movements over the past few days, careful but discreet. There was something about her determination that intrigued him, but also a cautionary alarm. He had lived long enough to know that danger often came disguised as good intentions. And yet, he couldn't ignore the pull he felt toward her mission. Something about it stirred his own need for redemption, the sense that perhaps he could do something meaningful without endangering himself completely. The first real interaction between them came unexpectedly. Amina was following a lead near the market when a group of men, who had noticed her interest in the area, approached. Their intentions were unclear, but they were large, imposing, and unfriendly. Rafi, who had been walking home from his morning errands, noticed the tension immediately. Without a word, he stepped between the woman and the group, his presence calm but commanding. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, yet his stance was enough to make the men pause. Amina watched in surprise as this stranger diffused the situation with subtle authority. There was no show of violence, only a quiet confidence that made her pause and reassess him. After the men left, she approached Rafi cautiously. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady but curious. "You didn't have to do that." Rafi shrugged, trying to appear casual.
I don't like seeing people intimidated, especially when they're alone.
His words were simple, but the tone carried depth. There was a story behind them, one that hinted at experience with danger, but he revealed nothing more. Over the next few days, their paths continued to cross. Amina observed him, noting the way he helped neighbors with minor tasks, how he interacted with children, and how he seemed to know the ins and outs of the town better than anyone. He appeared ordinary on the surface, yet she felt that he held knowledge that could be valuable to her mission. One afternoon, Amina approached him directly, deciding it was time to test the waters.
I'm looking for information, she said carefully, about people who might be moving in and out of town quietly, people who don't belong here.
Rafi's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face. He was accustomed to hiding, to carefully measuring his words and actions.
And why would you think I could help? He asked.
His voice was guarded but not hostile. "Because I've noticed you," she replied simply. "You seem to know more about this place than most, and I need help." Her tone was earnest, not demanding, but it carried weight. For the first time, Rafi felt the tug of responsibility. He had been living quietly, avoiding trouble, but something in her voice reminded him of the promises he had made to himself long ago. To be better, to make amends in small ways, and to protect those who could not protect themselves. After a moment of silence, he said, "Maybe I can help, but I need to know that you can handle the truth. Some things here aren't what they seem." Amina nodded, sensing the weight behind his words. She had faced danger before, had seen things most people could not imagine, and yet she respected caution when it was necessary.
I can handle it, she said.
"I've faced worse." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the town's rooftops, they walked through narrow alleys and side streets. Rafi pointed out areas where suspicious activity had been reported, explaining in general terms what he had seen over the years. He spoke carefully, avoiding revealing too much about his own past, yet the information he provided gave Amina insight she had not expected. She realized that his knowledge of the town's hidden corners could be crucial in tracking the traffickers. Despite their cautious beginning, a subtle trust began to form. Amina noticed how Rafi observed people, not just their actions, but their intentions. There was a patience in him, a skill she recognized from her own work, the ability to see beyond the obvious, to understand motivations, and to anticipate moves before they happened. It was exactly what she needed in an ally, though she didn't yet know how much she could rely on him. As they continued their investigation, small moments of camaraderie emerged. They shared meals at the local cafe, discussing nothing and everything at the same time. Rafi taught her shortcuts through the town, places where one could move unseen if necessary.
Amina, in turn, shared stories from her work, not just as an investigator, but as someone driven by personal loss.
Each story revealed fragments of her humanity, and Rafi began to see the depth of her courage and her relentless commitment to justice. One late afternoon, they came across a clue that changed everything. A delivery truck, registered under a false name, had been spotted leaving the warehouse earlier that week. Amina knew this was a lead worth pursuing, but it would require careful planning and courage. Rafi hesitated, aware that getting involved would put him at risk. Yet he could not ignore the pull of purpose. He had spent years hiding, but the thought of allowing injustice to continue without intervention weighed heavily on him. They decided to follow the truck discreetly. Moving silently through the streets, they observed its route, noting the timing and the people involved. Amina's heart raced with anticipation and fear. This was the kind of moment she had trained for, the kind of situation where split-second decisions could save lives or cost them. Rafi moved with her, his calm presence a steadying force amid the tension. He guided her around corners, signaled when it was safe to move, and shared observations that revealed patterns she had not noticed before. By the time the sun set completely, they had gathered crucial information. They knew where the truck would likely stop and how it connected to the broader network of traffickers. For Amina, it was a breakthrough. For Rafi, it was a reminder that his skills and knowledge could serve a higher purpose. They were no longer strangers merely coexisting in the same town. They had become partners, bound by a shared goal and a growing respect for each other's abilities. That night, they parted ways with a silent understanding. Amina returned to her lodging, reviewing her notes and preparing for the next steps of her investigation. Rafi returned home, reflecting on the day and the unusual turn his life had taken. He had always avoided danger, but in helping her, he had felt a spark of something long buried, an opportunity to reclaim a sense of purpose. Even as the town slept, the threads of fate continued to weave around them. Both Amina and Rafi knew that the days ahead would test their courage, patience, and trust in ways they could not yet imagine. But in that quiet moment of alignment, they each understood one thing clearly. Together, they could face challenges that neither could face alone. And so, the stage was set for a journey that would demand bravery, resilience, and the willingness to confront both past mistakes and present dangers. As dawn approached, the town seemed peaceful once more, yet beneath the calm, the invisible currents of change were already moving. Amina and Rafi had begun a partnership that neither had sought but both desperately needed. Their paths had collided not by chance but by a force larger than either could name, a force that demanded courage, wisdom, and heart. And as the first light of morning fell across the rooftops, both felt, in their own way, that their lives were no longer the same. The town seemed calm on the surface, but beneath that quiet exterior, danger was stirring. Amina and Rafi had begun working together, carefully tracking the movements of the traffickers. Each day brought new information, new challenges, and a growing sense of urgency. Amina could feel the weight of her mission pressing on her, and she sensed that this town, peaceful as it appeared, held more secrets than anyone could imagine. Rafi had agreed to help her, though he remained cautious. He had spent years hiding from his past, carefully building a life where no one would question him, a life where he could at least pretend to be normal. But now, as he watched Amina move through the town with determination, he realized that hiding was no longer enough. He couldn't ignore the opportunity to do something meaningful, not just for himself, but for the people whose lives were at stake. Their investigation led them to a series of abandoned buildings on the outskirts of the town. Rafi recognized them immediately. He had lived here for years, and he knew the hidden spaces where people could move unseen. These places are often used for short-term hiding, he explained, glancing at the decaying structures. They look empty, but someone could be inside, watching, waiting. Amina listened carefully, taking notes and observing his expressions. There was a depth to his knowledge that came from experience, but she noticed subtle hesitations in his voice, moments when he looked away, as if memories he didn't want to revisit were surfacing. She didn't press him. She knew from experience that people reveal their pasts in their own time. What mattered now was that he was helping her, that his expertise could save lives. As they approached one of the buildings, they heard faint noises, a scrape, a whisper of movement. Amina's pulse quickened. She had been in dangerous situations before, but the tension of not knowing what lay inside made her stomach tighten. Rafi moved ahead cautiously, his steps deliberate and silent. He gestured for her to stay behind and peered inside a broken window. After a few moments he nodded, signaling that it was safe to enter. Inside, the building was dark and dusty, filled with the smell of old wood and damp stone. Shadows danced along the walls as they moved carefully, their eyes adjusting to the dim light. It was empty, at least for now, but the atmosphere was tense, as if the building itself held memories of those who had come and gone before. Amina spoke quietly, almost to herself. "It's worse than I thought," she said, thinking of the people who might be trapped, the lives that could be in danger. "They leave behind nothing but fear." Rafi nodded, his jaw tight. "I've seen it before," he admitted, his voice low. "Not here, but in other towns. People hiding, people suffering, and no one knowing." He paused, glancing at her. "It's why I try to stay out of it, because once you get involved, you can't unsee it. You can't stop caring." There was a pause between them, a quiet understanding forming. Both had experienced loss and pain in different ways, and both knew that the fight against injustice was not just physical, it was emotional, mental, and relentless. They didn't need to speak more to understand each other. That night, they returned to the town, planning their next steps. Amina reviewed the notes she had taken, mapping out the possible locations where traffickers might be operating. Rafi watched her, noticing her focus, her drive, and the way she never let fear dictate her actions. He felt a strange admiration for her, mixed with a sense of responsibility. He knew that his past, though hidden, could provide insights that might make the difference between success and failure. But Rafi's past was not easy to confront. That evening, as he returned to his modest home, memories surfaced that he had long tried to bury. He thought of the mistakes he had made, the people he had hurt, and the life he had abandoned. For years he had carried guilt like a shadow, never allowing himself to get too close to anyone or anything. Yet now, standing beside Amina, helping her navigate the dangerous world of trafficking, he felt that shadow shift. Perhaps this was his chance to make amends, to find a path toward redemption. The next day, they received a tip from a local shopkeeper about a suspicious delivery scheduled for the evening. The shopkeeper had noticed strange activity, unusual packages, unfamiliar faces, and a truck that did not match any registered local businesses. Amina knew that this could be a crucial lead. She and Rafi prepared carefully, planning to observe from a distance and gather information without putting themselves at risk. As evening fell, they positioned themselves near the location, hidden by the shadows of nearby buildings. The air was crisp, and the faint sound of birds settling for the night filled the silence. Amina's heart raced with anticipation. She had done this before, but each encounter with traffickers brought new dangers, new uncertainties. Rafi, standing beside her, seemed calm yet alert, his eyes scanning every movement, every shadow. The truck arrived just as his shopkeeper had described, and a group of men began unloading crates. Amina whispered instructions to Rafi, and he moved seamlessly, noting patterns and behaviors that confirmed their suspicions. They were meticulous, careful, and determined. Every observation was a piece of the puzzle, a step closer to understanding the network they were up against. But then something unexpected happened. One of the men glanced in their direction, noticing a slight movement. Amina froze, heart pounding, but Rafi's quick thinking allowed them to remain unseen. He signaled her to stay low and guided her away from sight. That brief moment of danger reminded them both of the stakes involved. Every decision mattered, every step could be critical, and there was no room for error. After the truck left, they reviewed what they had seen. The patterns were becoming clearer, the connections more obvious. Amina realized that Rafi's insights were invaluable. His understanding of human behavior and the town's hidden corners gave them an advantage she had not expected. For the first time, she considered the possibility that he could be more than an ally. He could be a partner in the truest sense, someone whose experience complemented her own skills perfectly. Yet trust was still fragile. Rafi had not revealed the full truth of his past, and Amina knew that understanding his history could either strengthen their partnership or create a rift. She decided to give him space, to let him share when he was ready, knowing that forcing the truth could jeopardize everything. Over the next few days, they continued their observations and gathered more evidence. Each clue, each small discovery, brought them closer to understanding the scope of the trafficking network. They shared quiet conversations, learning about each other's motivations, fears, and strengths. Amina admired Rafi's quiet resilience, the way he approached danger with careful calculation. Rafi respected Amina's courage, her unwavering commitment, and her ability to remain focused even under pressure. Then, one afternoon, Rafi made a decision. He felt that the time had come to reveal a part of his past to Amina. Not everything, but enough to explain why he knew what he knew. They were sitting in a quiet park, observing the flow of people through the town. Rafi took a deep breath and began. "There are things I've done, things I'm not proud of. I've been involved in circles that were dangerous, and I had to leave everything behind to survive. I'm not that person anymore, but I know enough about the way people operate to help you." Amina listened without interruption, her eyes steady on him. "I don't need to know everything," she said softly. "I need to know that you can be here, helping now, that you're on my side." Raffi nodded, relief passing over his face. "I am. I've waited a long time for a chance to do something meaningful again. This feels like it." The confession, quiet as it was, strengthened their bond. Both realized that their shared goal, the rescue of innocent people, required trust, courage, and the willingness to face their own fears. They had begun as strangers, moved through caution and observation, and now stood together, committed to a cause far greater than either had imagined. As the sun set, painting the town in shades of orange and gold, they prepared for the next phase of their plan. They knew that confronting the traffickers directly would be dangerous, that mistakes could be costly. Yet for the first time both felt a sense of purpose that transcended fear. They were no longer just pursuing justice. They were shaping their own redemption, healing old wounds, and finding strength in one another. By the time night fell, the town's quiet streets held an undercurrent of tension. The traffickers moved, unaware that their actions were being tracked. Amina and Raffi watched, waited, and planned, knowing that every small step brought them closer to the moment when courage, skill, and trust would collide. And in that delicate balance they discovered something deeper, that even in a world filled with darkness, hope could be found in the determination to act, to protect, and to fight for what was right. The night was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. Amina and Raffi had been tracking the traffickers for days, gathering information, following leads, and piecing together a network that had operated in shadows for far too long. They knew that the next step, the direct confrontation, would be the most dangerous yet. It was no longer about observation or planning, it was about action. Every decision, every move, would carry immense risk. Amina reviewed the plan one last time, checking every detail. They had identified a hidden warehouse where the traffickers were keeping people temporarily, moving them from one location to another under the cover of night. It was small, unassuming, and perfectly suited for secrecy, but she knew that inside there were lives depending on them. She felt a familiar surge of determination, that unwavering drive that had always guided her in the face of danger. Raffi stood beside her, calm but focused. He had spent years avoiding situations like this, hiding from the mistakes of his past, trying to remain invisible. But now, standing in the shadows with Amina, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than any fear he had ever known. He had seen what the traffickers were capable of, and he knew that hesitation could cost lives. For the first time in a long while, he embraced the responsibility, knowing that courage meant stepping forward even when the outcome was uncertain. They approached the warehouse cautiously, moving silently through the surrounding woods. Every rustle of leaves, every distant sound, heightened their senses. Raffi led the way, pointing out blind spots and areas where the traffickers might be watching. Amina followed, her eyes sharp, taking in every detail. They were a team now, their movements synchronized, their trust in each other absolute. Inside the warehouse, shadows shifted as the traffickers moved about, unloading crates and organizing supplies. The air smelled of dust, sweat, and the faint hint of machinery oil. It was a place where lives were being treated as commodities, where fear was currency, and every sound echoed with tension. Amina's heart ached for those trapped inside, but she steeled herself, knowing that panic would be a liability. They needed precision, strategy, and courage. Raffi signaled to her to stay low and follow his lead. They moved along the edges of the building, staying out of sight while observing the layout. Amina's mind raced, thinking of the victims inside, their faces, their fear, their hope that someone would come to save them. She could not fail them. Raffi, noticing her focus, whispered, "Stay calm. We've got this. We just need to follow the plan." His voice was steady, grounding her in the moment. The plan was simple but risky. They would create a distraction at the far side of the warehouse, drawing some of the traffickers away, while the rest would enter through a side entrance to free the captives. Timing was everything. Any misstep could alert the traffickers and put everyone at risk. They had rehearsed the plan in their minds countless times, but now reality demanded perfection. As they executed the plan, Raffi moved with surprising agility and confidence. His experience in navigating dangerous situations, even from his troubled past, proved invaluable. He guided Amina through the shadows, signaling when it was safe to move, warning her of patrol patterns and anticipating potential hazards. Together, they created a distraction, throwing a crate to produce noise while remaining hidden. Some of the traffickers moved to investigate, leaving openings for Amina and Raffi to enter. Inside, the warehouse was darker than they had expected, filled with crates, cages, and the low murmurs of frightened voices. Amina's heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay focused. She whispered instructions to the victims, calming them, encouraging them to stay quiet while they guided them toward the exits. Raffi assisted, using his knowledge of the building's layout to navigate efficiently and avoid detection. Despite their careful planning, danger was never far away. One of the traffickers returned unexpectedly, hearing the faint movement of the captives being guided out. Amina froze, but Raffi acted instinctively, stepping between the trafficker and her. His presence, calm yet commanding, bought just enough time for her to slip past and continue helping the victims. The moment was tense, but it reinforced the trust and synergy they had developed. They were no longer working as individuals. They were a unit, relying on each other's strengths to succeed. As the captives were let out, the traffickers began to realize that something was wrong. A sudden commotion erupted, and a brief but intense confrontation occurred. Raffi and Amina remained composed, using strategy and quick thinking to manage the situation. No one was harmed, but the traffickers were forced to retreat temporarily, giving the rescued individuals a chance to escape safely. The tension was immense, yet the teamwork between Amina and Raffi allowed them to maintain control of the situation. Once outside, the group of rescued victims gathered in a safe location. Relief washed over Amina, but she remained vigilant. She knew that the traffickers could regroup, and that their mission was not yet complete. Raffi, observing the scene, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had once avoided confrontation, shied away from responsibility, and now, in the face of danger, he had acted with courage and purpose. For him, this was more than a victory over criminals. It was a personal redemption, a step toward healing the scars of his past. The night stretched on as Amina coordinated with local authorities, ensuring that the victims would be safely transported and protected. Raffi assisted where he could, his presence a steady support amidst the chaos. They worked tirelessly, their combined skills complementing each other perfectly. Every step forward was a triumph, every life saved a testament to their determination and bravery. During a brief moment of calm, Amina and Raffi stood together, observing the town from a distance. The stars reflected off the rooftops, and the quiet of the night felt almost surreal after the intensity of the confrontation. "We did it," Amina said softly, though her voice carried the weight of exhaustion and relief. Raffi nodded, a small smile crossing his face. "We did, and we couldn't have done it alone." His words were simple, but they conveyed a depth of emotion that went beyond gratitude. There was pride, relief, and the recognition that together they had accomplished something significant. But even in this moment of triumph, both knew that their journey was far from over. The traffickers had been disrupted, yes, but their network was vast. There would be more challenges, more dangers, and more moments that tested courage and resolve. Yet for the first time, both felt confident in their ability to face whatever came next, knowing that they had each other to rely on. As dawn approached, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Amina and Raffi helped ensure that the rescued individuals were safe and receiving care. They exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had formed between them. What began as a professional collaboration had evolved into something deeper, a shared understanding, a mutual respect, and a commitment to continue fighting for justice, no matter the cost. In the quiet aftermath, Amina reflected on the journey so far. She had faced countless challenges, experienced moments of fear and doubt, and endured personal loss, yet she had never felt as determined as she did now. Raffi had taught her the value of calm strategy, patience, and understanding the human element in every situation. Together, they had not only confronted criminals but also faced their own fears and limitations. Raffi, too, felt a shift within himself. He had spent so long running from his past, avoiding danger, and trying to be invisible. Now, he realized that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. By standing beside Amina, helping to save lives, and confronting the traffickers directly, he had taken steps toward his own redemption. It was not complete, and it would not be instant, but it was real, and it was meaningful. As the town slowly awakened to a new day, life continued around them, unaware of the events that had unfolded in the shadows. But Amina and Raffi knew the truth. They had faced darkness together, relied on each other's strengths, and emerged with lives saved and a bond forged in courage and trust. It was a night they would never forget, a turning point in their journey, and a testament to the power of determination, bravery, and partnership. The town had returned to its quiet rhythm, the kind of calm that seemed ordinary to anyone passing through. But for Amina and Raffi, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The events of the past few days had shifted something deep within them, shaping not just their mission, but their understanding of themselves, each other, and the power of purpose. The traffickers had been disrupted, the victims were safe, and yet the true challenge now was finding meaning in the aftermath, a way to carry forward the courage and resilience they had discovered in themselves. Amina walked through the streets of the town in the early morning, breathing in the crisp air. She felt the weight of exhaustion, but it was a different kind of tiredness, the kind that comes after a battle fought with every ounce of determination, a battle where lives had been at stake and survival depended on courage. She thought of the people they had rescued, the faces she would never forget, and the hope that she had helped restore. Every step she took reinforced the conviction that her work mattered, not just as a job, but as a calling. Raffi followed at a distance, observing the quiet energy in Amina. There was a grace in the way she moved, a determination that was tempered by compassion. He admired her, not only for her courage but for the way she inspired others without demanding it. For him it was a lesson in humility, resilience, and the quiet power of steadfast purpose. He reflected on his own journey, how far he had come from the man who once hid in shadows, avoiding confrontation and running from responsibility. That man no longer existed. What remained was someone capable of action, someone who could face danger and emerge stronger, someone who could seek redemption not just in words, but in deeds. The aftermath required careful attention. Amina coordinated with local authorities and support groups to ensure the victims were safely relocated, provided with medical care, and given counseling. Every detail mattered: their safety, their emotional well-being, and their trust in the system that had failed them before. Raffi assisted quietly, helping wherever he could, often in small, unnoticed ways, carrying supplies, offering guidance, and maintaining vigilance to ensure no danger approached. His presence was subtle but vital, a testament to the strength of his character and the lessons learned from his past. During the process, a quiet bond grew between Amina and Raffi, deeper than mere partnership. They shared moments of reflection, small conversations that revealed personal fears, dreams, and regrets. Amina spoke of the loved one she had lost, the pain that had driven her into this work, and the moments when doubt had threatened to overwhelm her. Raffi in turn shared fragments of his past, not the full story, but enough to show the struggle he had faced, the mistakes he had made, and the reasons he had chosen to hide. Their honesty, shared at different times and in different ways, built a bridge of trust, respect, and mutual understanding that neither had anticipated. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the town square, they found a quiet bench to sit and observe the world around them. Children played nearby, their laughter a stark contrast to the darkness they had faced in recent days. People moved about, unaware of the events that had unfolded in their midst, their ordinary lives continuing despite the hidden battles fought in the shadows. Amina turned to Raffi, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I've learned something these past days," she said quietly. "It's not just about rescuing people. It's about believing that change is possible, even in the darkest places. And it's about having the courage to step into that darkness, even when it scares you. Raffi nodded, the corners of his lips lifting in a small smile. I've learned that hiding doesn't protect you, he said. I've spent years avoiding my past, thinking it would define me forever. But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. And sometimes, redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about using what you've learned to make a difference now. The reflections were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching. It was one of the rescued individuals, a young woman who had been trapped in the network for weeks. She approached him hesitantly, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and gratitude. I wanted to say thank you, she said softly, voice trembling. You saved my life. You didn't have to, but you did. Amina reached out, offering a comforting hand, while Raffi simply nodded, his expression quietly sincere. In that moment, the weight of their work, the danger they had faced, and the choices they had made all coalesced into something tangible. Hope restored, courage rewarded, lives changed. As the days passed, Amina returned to her work with renewed vigor, inspired by the courage she had witnessed in Raffi and the resilience of the people they had helped. She organized awareness campaigns in nearby towns, worked with law enforcement to strengthen networks against traffickers, and continued to provide support to those who had suffered. Her personal mission had gained a new dimension, one that combined professional dedication with the emotional fulfillment of seeing lives transformed for the better.
Raffi, meanwhile, began to emerge from the shadows of his past in small but significant ways.
He sought opportunities to contribute to the community openly, mentoring at-risk youth, volunteering at local shelters, and using his knowledge to help prevent crime rather than participate in it. Every act of service reinforced his sense of purpose, his belief that the mistakes of yesterday could be transformed into lessons for a better tomorrow. He no longer feared the world as he once had. Instead, he faced it with the confidence that came from having made meaningful choices in moments that truly mattered. Their bond, forged in the heat of danger and the quiet moments of reflection, became a foundation for a partnership that transcended the professional realm. They celebrated victories, supported each other through moments of doubt, and shared the quiet understanding that comes from confronting darkness. Together, it was a relationship built on mutual respect, trust, and the recognition that courage and redemption were not solitary journeys. They were forged through connection, action, and commitment. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills surrounding the town, Amina and Raffi stood together on a small hill overlooking the streets below. The town was calm, peaceful, and unaware of the battles that had been fought in its name. They watched in silence, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here, the fear, the courage, the danger, and the moments of quiet humanity that had defined their mission. I never imagined I'd find this, Amina said softly, breaking the silence. Not just success, but this sense of peace, knowing we did what we could, and knowing that we can continue to make a difference. Raffi smiled, a quiet, genuine expression. I never imagined it either, he replied. I spent so long running, hiding, thinking I could never change. But now, I see that redemption isn't a single act. It's every choice we make from this point forward. And I'm grateful that we could do this together. They stood there, side by side, letting the quiet of the evening wash over them. The journey had been long, difficult, and fraught with danger, but it had led them to a moment of clarity, understanding, and hope. They knew challenges would continue to come, that danger could return, and that the fight for justice would never truly end. But they also knew that together they had the strength, courage, and resilience to face whatever lay ahead. In the days that followed, Amina continued her advocacy and investigative work, always carrying the memory of the rescued individuals and the lessons learned from her partnership with Raffi. Raffi continued his efforts to contribute positively to the community, seeking ways to use his experience for good and to help others avoid the mistakes he had once made. Both had found in each other a kind of strength that could not be measured, An understanding that courage, compassion, and purpose could transform not only lives but also hearts. The town, quiet as it seemed, had witnessed the transformation of two individuals who had faced darkness. Amina and Rafi had not only confronted external dangers but had also confronted their own fears, regrets, and limitations. In doing so, they had discovered something essential: that redemption, hope, and courage are born from action, empathy, and the willingness to face challenges with integrity and heart. As the sun rose higher each day, illuminating the streets and rooftops, life in the town moved forward. Children laughed, markets bustled, and ordinary moments of joy returned to a place that had briefly been touched by danger and despair. Yet for Amina and Rafi, the town would never seem ordinary again. They carried within them the memory of courage tested, lives saved, and the realization that even in the darkest circumstances, it is possible to make a difference. Their story became a quiet legend in the town, whispered among those who had witnessed their actions and remembered by the lives they had touched. But more importantly, it became a personal truth for both Amina and Rafi, that even the deepest scars of the past could be healed through courage, compassion, and the choice to act in service of others. And in that choice, they had not only saved lives, they had found redemption, purpose, and the hope of new beginnings.